Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. Alexandra Rithi is the head of programs at the Institute of Social Accountability. Dr. Makali Mulo is the MP representing Kitui Central, a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, an economist by training. Churchill Ogutu is also an economist with the IC Group. CPA Julius Ruto, the MP representing the people of Keses constituency and a member of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. Gentlemen, thanks for your time and staying with us. Churchill, coming to you. There is more and more red lines that have been breached in this case, looking at the wage bill revenue ordinary ratio, which is ideally supposed to be 35% per the PFM Act, is already at 43%. This points to the direction of more taxes, is it? Or otherwise, cutting expenditure on the part of the state?
So we have the fiscal responsibility principles, that's section 15 of the Public Finance Management Act, which amongst one of the sub-articles speaks about the ratio of the wage bill to the income, national government income. So you can look at it even in terms of the national government and also the county governments. So for the county governments, I think they have surpassed that ratio. The wage bill is quite high, the 43%. If you look at the official numbers, even from the budget review outlook paper for the current financial year, it may show some semblance of that it is within that threshold, because it's below 35%. But we know that there could be some allowances that could be sneaked in that potentially is not captured in, because the wage bill as is captured here is around 600 billion to the national government. So the concern now becomes as to the allowances, because time and again, even there's
wage bill entirely for this financial year?
This is for the financial year
2025-6.
2025-2026. This table 5 of the budget review and outlook paper, which kind of shows that it is within that threshold. But now we have had discussions with the salaries from the Salaries and Revenue Review Commission, now speaking to this many allowances that are there to the public sector. So the scope of even reducing the allowances that some of the public servants are receiving to be able to reduce even the public the wage bill quite low, so there's scope for that. National, on the county governments, that's where it's still and the elephant in the room, because the wage bill as a proportion of the revenue is quite elevated over there. So that's discussion that needs to be had, so as to be able to ensure that that wage bill is contained to more meaningful levels, the 35% threshold.
Yeah, and Honorable Ruto, I'm looking at, for instance, this financial year, ordinary revenues 2.75 trillion, the appropriations in aid 567 billion, grants 46, they're about 0.9, and a deficit of 923 billion, which comes to a total of 4.29 trillion. Looking at the main two components that will gobble this up, debt 1.7 trillion, and the wage bill is 1.17 trillion. A lot of focus needs to be given here, is it?
Sure. If you look at our budget that we present, this presented to Parliament for the people of Kenya, at times it sounds like it is overambitious. But again, appreciating, as I was saying, the expenditure side, where we have the trouble. Our revenue performance has been wanting. Every other time targets are given, the collections doesn't make it to the point. You know what that does speak about? It speaks about that the National Treasury have to go in for other sources, especially to manage the cash flow demand. Because continually, if you look at the releases of exchequer, servicing of debts that are timely, that are by law, the law says they're given fast charge. Again, it's what is being collected from the taxes at every given time or period to go period. It's not matching. And I'm sure this is where we are facing a lot of trouble in our economic sustainability and growth. Because now the government has turned back to borrow domestically. The conditionalities around external borrowing is tightening. Remember, look at all these other issues that are coming up every other time. You need to review your finance bill upwards, like 2024 finance bill. Most of them are indicated or informed much by the conditions attached to budget support funding. that Treasury have been going outside there. So they are now resorted back to the domestic. Yeah. And that is why now banks are finding it lucrative to preserve resources to sell to the government than to sell to the economy. Yeah. And that's why these things are not merging together. Somebody was calling it crowding out the private sector. So this is something that we must agree that either we have to live within our means, we stop being overambitious, because the push that is given to these sectors, health sector, look at the education sector is staggering, leave alone even the PE. The education sector is staggering. It's not moving forward. The other day, the minister came out and said, we cannot meet the capitations. We cannot pay. I mean, he came out bluntly, open and truth. So if you look at those demands that are continuously increasing on the expenditure side, putting pressure on the revenue, pressure on the revenue again, there's no any other source of revenue. It is taxes. Whether you borrow now, you have to tax to pay. Because you can borrow it now to sort out a problem or to service a demand now. But remember, that is a foregone, that is, it is a deferred revenue yet to be collected. So either way, we must come to a discussion. The other issue that silently we are not speaking about.
I'll allow you to finish up on the second point. The SRC, because this is again a conglomeration of key critical institutions which all inform. The Salaries Commission also pointed out the duplication of roles, oversplitting of roles, weak payroll management, and low labor productivity as some of the contributory factors. If then this is heeded, and from the other sectors as well, and you parliamentarians who are very critical as the guardrails, can we improve on our budget?
The issue here, and I want to agree, I think the essence of devolution was to reduce some pressure on the national level, because some of the service delivery points and the duplication of roles, you realize there's the State Department of Agriculture with a huge budget, State Department of Health Services with a huge budget. If you go back to the counties, there's a replication of the same. Like at times I say we have 48 ministers of one docket, the Minister of National Government for Agriculture and 48 ministers of counties. What are the roles of these people? The same, we have PS in the national government, several other chief officers, the other side. I think it is time that we have to have a national discussion around here so that we let go of what should go to county, let it be at county. Then we reduce the duplication at national government. But again, we keep discussing the issues of corruption at national level. We've never gone back to look at what the performance at county. I mean, nobody's telling us vividly what happens in these little resources that continuously counties are demanding by law. They are saying that their revenue should be growing. Now we are doing around 420. I'm sure this particular, if you look at the budget policy statement that is about to come, county should be demanding around 500 billion. The accountability of the same is not seen. So that you realize at times it's a problem the other day in Elgeyo Marakwet. Counties are there to say that we have resources aligned to managing disaster. National government are running over the same problem. Where are these resources coming from? It is coming from the same coffers. So I agree that for us to be able to have a sustainable budget and expenditure for the Republic of Kenya, we must come to terms. Let's talk about the CBS. And a lot of industrial actions are happening here. Sometimes we want to channel and say, please give rights to teachers, give rights to nurses, give rights to doctors. You know what does that imply? Continuous increasing of the wage bill. On the other side, we are not talking about where to get the money to pay them. It means the future is that there are some other shops that have to be closed so that money will only go to wage bill. So are we reducing also the nation to only employment bureau? Are we reducing counties to employment bureau? So I think we must have a discussion around that, truth to be said, because we have to be candid to ourselves. This thing is not sustainable.
Okay, and Dr. I'll come to specifically on then how we can turn around our economy to be export-oriented economy and productivity-led agriculture with a specific focus. We'll come to that. But Alex, he points out that there are pain points in the economy that must be handled. You pointed out the deficit for the next financial year. This year, 900, nearly $1 trillion. And looking at recurrent entirely, it's 3.13 trillion of the 4.29 trillion, which means development only gets 693 billion Kenya shillings. This is interesting, is it? But also the stark reality of how we must manage ourselves.
Well, you start at a very good point. if you look at the projected deficit for this financial year at 923 billion and a development expenditure of 600 plus billion, that already tells you that there is about 200 or thereabout billion shillings that is going to be borrowed specifically for recurrent. This goes straight against our legal requirements of borrowing for development. Looking at the budget that we are about to go for public hearings, the deficit that is projected, I've said, is over $1 trillion. But what has been projected for development expenditure is only 761 billion. This again tells you almost 250 or thereabout billion will be borrowed for recurrent expenditure. This outrightly goes against our legal requirement that we should only borrow for development. So now, when you look at now some of the aspects that Mheshimiwa was talking about, the same PFM Act provides that our wage bill should not exceed 35%. Right now, we are somewhere between 43 and 48%. So this is where we start going wrong, in my view, because we go against our own fiscal responsibility principles, and therefore, even Parliament, in my view, and now that they are represented here, this is a sort of a budget that should not be approved, in my view, because it outrightly, from the face of it, it goes against our constitution. Because if you have a development budget of 761 and a deficit of $1 trillion, it already tells you that there's some money that we are going to borrow and take it to recurrent expenditure. But now, looking at the current, the year that had just ended in June, we spent 1.6 trillion shillings on debt repayment. That accounts for about 70% of every other revenue that we collected. Out of every 10 shillings that we collected, 7 shillings went into debt repayment. So now that leaves you with only 3 shillings to pay your salaries, government operations, said to counties. So it means we are doing very badly. Recently, I was in a meeting in Accra looking at the debt situation in Africa. And it shocks you when examples of countries that are in debt distress are mentioned. Kenya comes right on top. But in our space here, we seem not to see the urgency of the situation that we are in. Very soon, it's going to be very difficult for us to function. Because if you have 7 shillings out of every 10 that you collect is going to debt repayment, and then we have now the unrest that Mheshimiwa is talking about, where are we going to get this money from? And then we have all these other big projects that we are doing. That is now what is bringing up these new borrowing spaces that I believe don't go through Parliament, like the securitization that we are seeing. This is not part of what went in the MTDS. And in my view, these are questions that Parliament should be helping us ask. How did you go into securitization? How is it framed? Is it part of our debt stock? Because I believe in the MTDS, this was not part of what was approved. But now, you see more and more of that. And what this does, it means that we are now borrowing against future revenues. And what this does, it means that even a future regime cannot change some of the policies that are being implemented today. For instance, the 175 billion shillings that we acquired through securitization of the fuel levy, it means the 7 bob that I'm paying for each litre that is going back to repayment of the 175 billion. The next government might not be in a position to reverse that until we repay the entire. I think we've also done the same with the Talanta Stadium. We've securitized the sports fund. So the revenues that we are getting from there will go into that particular investment. So until we come up with a way of repaying that money, those particular policies that are coming up now may never be reversed. And it may be unfortunate if we continue with that trend and we end up securitizing other revenue streams. Because it will mean any other government that comes, either now, or in 2027, or even after, might be locked into a space where they have no wiggle space.
Yes, Dr.
You know, this issue of public debt is a very interesting issue. And if we want to help this country matters public debt, we need to engage seriously on what we call public debt transparency. That we need to have a very well-documented procedure now to borrow for Kenyans, because we are borrowing for Kenyans. And I think one of the things we have learned is like he says, you know, numbers don't lie. Statistics will never lie. If you are borrowing $1 trillion,
and we are putting in development budget at 700 billion, it automatically says 300 billion is being borrowed for recurrent. Our law is very clear. A country should never borrow to finance recurrent expenditure. And I think that's what we need. And we are proposing in Parliament. Actually, I will tell you, Ayub, if you look at our parliamentary budget reports, every budget report we do as a Parliament, and my colleague here will confirm, it has very clear recommendations on what needs to be done to improve our budget making process in this country. But the challenge has been implementation of these reports. How many times have we said that borrowing should be project specific? Since we are supposed to be borrowing for development, can we say we are taking this 30 billion for this project? We are taking this 20 billion for this. In that case, you even have we'll have a very clear monitoring and evaluation framework that we can monitor and say we borrowed this money and it went to this area. We borrowed this money and it went. But you know, we just borrow, and it looks like there's minimal transparency in the way we do it. And I can tell you, anytime you want to go into details, there's serious resistance. You find this like, and you know, we've said it many times, the challenge we're having with our democracy, because we are Kenya is a democratic country, is democracy demands that majority will have their way, minority will have their voice. So this voice of reason next to me here would be in the Parliament, saying the things he's saying, but when it comes to say yes or no, the highest will have it, despite what he will have said. The only good thing is, what he would have said is documented, it's captured in the Hansard, and it remains a permanent record. So if you go to the Hansard and look at what we say when we are discussing our budgets, nothing we have said which is new here. Something simple like the wage bill. How do you calculate the wage bill?
But Dr. before we come to the wage bill, how comes there is this mystery of what we borrow being shrouded in secrecy that the public doesn't know, one, and Parliament also, parliamentarians? I mean, you have been given significant power, first as a House, and second, also over the budget process entirely. So what has happened which has led to this uncertainty about what we borrow?
I can tell you, for me, because even look at this, even now, forget about the budget committee. Parliament has created a committee called Public Debt and Privatization Committee, purely to look at matters public debt. But despite that, I can tell you, when we went, because I used to be the first chair of that committee, we would pick a specific loan by loan, sector by sector. And I'm telling you, a very interesting situation. One point, we discovered money had been borrowed for KPLC, and that loan was in our books for over 7 years. KPLC themselves didn't know that there was a loan borrowed for them.
They themselves?
The institution. You go to agriculture, you find the loan was taken. The loan has been in our books. The last 10 years, that loan, nobody has used that loan. It has never, we have never drawn a single cent from that loan, and we are paying commitment fee. It's crazy. I'm telling you, when you look at these things, you ask yourself, and then you say we are poor. On a serious note, this country, we only need a very simple thing. Can we get back to the basics of how you manage a budget? Be open, stick to your proposals, and then engage what the Constitution says. Prudent management of public resources. We are only lacking the word prudent. If we go to that level, there will be no need to borrow, I can tell you. We have enough resources in this country. But you know, that word prudent is there on paper.
Yes, Chachi.
Is there on paper?
Allow me to latch on Alex's point around the fiscal responsibility principles, and that's tying on Section 15 of the Public Finance Management Act. Allow me to read in verbatim subsection 1. Over the medium term, a minimum of 30% of the national and county government's budget shall be allocated to the development expenditure. And the third point is, over the medium term, the national government's borrowing shall be used only for the purposes of financing development expenditure and not for recurrent expenditure. We have lawmakers, actually sitting, they have saddled me. So probably they may need to relook at tweaking these words, these 4 words, over the medium term, because that's how probably the government is able to get away with it. Minimum of national government, as Alex had said, the development expenditure, the minimum should be 30%. We're not even hitting that 30%. In terms of the borrowing, should be exclusively for development expenditure. That's not the case, because it's speaking of over the medium term. Remember, this is a moving target. This is the year 2025, 2026. But what is the over the medium term from this point in time? You're looking at the next 3 financial years. That is the medium term, which is different from a vantage point of fiscal year 2015, 2016, or 2012, when the PFM Act was passed. So over the medium term is a bit ambiguous, because it's talking that, oh, this is aspirational, that over the next 3 years, this is what we'll be able to achieve. But if we can hard code it the same way that we've done with the public debt, that in the next 5 years, when the amendment was done, that the public debt in present value terms should be 55% plus or minus 5%, okay, and should be achieved by October 2028. Why can we also go back to this particular section 15 and say that potentially by June 2028 or June 2030, we should be able to achieve this, rather than so as to reduce this moving target that it is, because over the medium term is a bit ambiguous. It's still a bit aspirational. The bit about borrowing, yes, the reports have been come out from Parliament that we need to see specific projects that will be funded from the borrowing. Case in point, in the domestic borrowing, we have what you call infrastructure bonds. And ideally, infrastructure bonds should go to infrastructural projects. Previously, the prospectus for infrastructure bonds will tell us that the proceeds of this money is going towards roads, energy, and water projects. Now it's anyone's guess where the proceeds of infrastructure bonds is getting into. So this is something that even Honorable Makali has pointed out, that we need to see even the specific projects that needs to be, that will be beneficial, that will benefit from the borrowing that we are getting. Case in point, more so the domestic borrowing. At least if you look at the project finance, yes, there's some project that is tied to that, that is on the external side. Domestic borrowing, commercial borrowing, say the Eurobonds and the budget support financing, those ones we never get to see the specifics. The other issue,
why is the case? Why can't Kenyans be in a position to know about the specifics?
Parliament has already put its word out that they need to see the specifics of the projects that needs to benefit from some of these loans financing. Why is this not the case? I mean, it's anyone's guess why is that not the case. But also remember that part of the borrowing is going towards recurrent expenditure, which should not be the case if you look at the section 15(3) of the PFM Act, yeah, that ideally should go to development expenditure. So if we reach a point whereby the borrowing is entirely to development expenditure, at least that we cannot be able to see the visibilities of where the money is channeled, the specific projects that will benefit from that. The other issue that some opacity around borrowing comes from the fact that the numbers that we are hearing, the 923 billion to be borrowed in this financial year, the 1 trillion to be borrowed in the next financial year, this is in net terms. That means that some of the debt that we are supposed to repay in the current financial year or the next financial year, that component has not been included. So there's 800 billion debt that we are repaying in this financial year, for instance. So if you include that to the 923, so you are looking at a borrowing of 1.7 trillion. And that's why there's been segment of people coming out saying that, oh, there's some opacity or there's some opaque debts out there, because Parliament approves borrowing of 900 billion, yet the actual borrowing, yeah, the gross borrowing is way above that, because we are what we call redeeming the debt. So we have to borrow to pay back some of the debt. Yeah. So that is also another thing that potentially creates the confusion or the debate around the opacity. So if it's clear, yes, that this 923 is in net borrowing, as opposed to gross borrowing, at least it will help to reduce some of this confusion that is out there.
Yes. Honorable Ruto, you pointed out the need for taxation to move the economy forward. But, and Dr. Makali pointed this out, over the past decade, when Kibaki left power, has there been, in your view, gross mismanagement of our economy? Because we are here because of specific decisions that were made which led to this economic situation.
Thank you. Listening to all of us over here, the panelists and their response, we are all lamenting. I mean, everyone is like, should have been the ideal situation. This is not the ideal situation. It begs a question then, when will all this discussion change to something practical? I think it is time that we must appreciate the fact that we need to be realistic as Kenyans. One of the issues is that it is now evident the government cannot sustain employment. The more we are churning out trainees, human resource trained technical people from the schools, from the colleges, the truth is the government of the day can no longer sustain any new employment. Exceptional of some critical sectors like health, which is of essence that we require a number of health personnel to be able to address the growing demand on that sector. And what does this imply? It means we must think outside the box. Where is the private sector in this? Because the moment our private sector is stable, if we put our energies on a private sector, we are going to balance this so that we have an ecosystem that is balancing. Private sector is not doing well. What are the reasons behind it? The issue of production. Other than first of all, look at our production before we look at the factors around production there. Other than the food that we thank God, I don't know, I think this regime came by God's grace. Rains has been, that we've experienced support of God's nature through rains. At least we have food now, unlike where we started. Because if all this discussion was involving food, the country would not be there as we talk. We want to thank God for that. We have rains, we have food. But the question is, beyond this production of food for subsistence, what next? Where is our manufacturing sector? Because all this we are here because we are doing poor on our manufacturing. And that's why I'm saying it has to come to a point where we must make a very painful decision to begin to grow our own manufacture, specifically for our own consumption, leave alone even for marketing outside. We have 50 million Kenyans, that is 50 million consumers that can be turned into an economic activity. But then look at this, food sector. For us to eat, we must import edible oil. For how long? We have good agriculture. We can have alternative production of growing of crops that then yield back to what we need in terms of demand. Look at our clothing. All these nice clothes we have in here, if you check on the tax here, all of them are coming from abroad. We are saying we are doing poorly, but we are exporting more money outside. We are becoming, a trading economy. This thing will not sustain our economy. On the other side, because private sector is not doing well, every other Kenyan want to be employed by the government, either by county, either by national. It is becoming a political question. Governor is elected on the promise that he's going to employ. Governor is put into pressure. Mahandaman every now and then. Where is our employment? So governors are forced because of survival to employ on casual. They are growing there. If you look at the county government's PE, all of them are hitting above 45%, true to be said. Why? Because they want to address the political pressure on the ground. Kenyans are looking upon them to give them space. Now, coming to what you are raising about where we are, as I've said, there are only two options. We must sit down and agree to say that for us to survive, how are we going to create desire for Kenyans to buy from our own shelves? How are we going to create? Because one, Kenya, again, in this process of us weakening our own private sector, we have reduced our country to dumping market. Most of the products in our shelves are substandard. But because we are looking for the cheapness, the cost element, because of our buying ability, we're going to buy anything in the shelf, from China, from where even we don't control the quality. What are we doing? We are growing the other economy because they are now sitting down, they are putting their strategic plans because there's a market called Kenya. The only time that we will turn around this is for us Kenyans to have a national discourse around this one. It will be painful for some moment, but it will be sustainable. Number two, as again I've said, the issue of prudence. It is eating us now. Yesterday, it was still a theoretical discussion. why we are here now, that we cannot move without borrowing. We cannot move, we cannot sustain our infrastructure demand. Right now we are discussing in our sector working group, what is our infrastructure demand? We need roads. The roads that we started in Kibaki time are running down. What it was started by Huru, look at what you call annuity roads under Kera. It was not projected on how to be sustained. They are wearing out, so they need to be corrected. What is going to happen? The question in the current administration, let's look at alternative ways. The only alternative way now is to securitize the money, raise the money, pay the contractors to complete the incomplete projects which were started in the last regime. They have to be completed, and the time they are completing, already the way they started, it is wearing out. They need to be corrected. Kenyans are asking for new connections. But then, what is the economic importance of these linkages? Now, the question the other day we were discussing about President Ahad speaking, was it in Qatar?
Yes.
The issue of power. What are we going to do about these sectors? Because again, Kenya Power, who is the seller, are lamenting on the cost of transporting the power from the source.
And someone has borrowed on their behalf without them knowing.
And someone has borrowed on their behalf without knowing. So, I mean, all these Kenyans, we are here because of us. And we'll be out of here by ourselves.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Alexander, coming to the solutions, certainly this is not a parachuted problem from the skies. They were all man-made and Kenyan-made. So institutions like Parliament, as you have seen here, at times they also walk in the dark about accountability and transparency on our debt. Ideally then, what's the direction going forward? Because responsibility must lie somewhere.
Well, that's a good question. The beginning point, I come back to Mheshimiwa where he has stopped. We must, at some point, and I think now here is where poets would say we have crossed the Rubicon. We need to sit and ask ourselves as a country, what is the optimal level of our expenditure? We cut our cloth according to our size. Right now, we have a budget in this fiscal year of 4.29 trillion. What we are proposing in the hearings that we are going to start today is 4.6 trillion. My question is, must our budget grow? Must we have our budget growing from 4.2 now to 4.6? My answer is no. We need to see how we reduce our expenditures. We've been talking about the so-called fiscal consolidation. Right now, the fiscal consolidation basically is trying to reduce our fiscal deficit from a high of 8-something% in the COVID year. I think in the current budget, that was approved by Parliament, we projected to go to 4.3 or thereabout. But what I've seen in the budget review now took paper, in the next fiscal year, we are going to 4.9. Ordinarily, what we've been told by the IMF, the optimal level would be anywhere below 3% fiscal deficit, 3% of GDP. Now, what Kenyans are asking is, we are in all these problems, and 7 shillings are going to debt repayment and all that, but when you look at the way we are spending, it doesn't show as if we have this problem. When you look, I think all of us have been on our TVs and we are seeing what is happening in Bel and all. We are seeing a country that is spending as if we have absolutely no problem. The empowerment programs that we are seeing going around, it doesn't give you any clue of a country that is in distress. And that is what now angers Kenyans. They wonder, we are in all these problems, and when we look at our leaders, the way they spend, the way they live, it's as if for them, they're in a different world, and for us, we're in a different world. That is why Kenyans will be agitated like in 2024, when now they see we have our leaders spending in a particular way, but then taxes are being pushed on us. So it means the small person down there is being pressed harder and harder and harder. They are losing jobs, businesses are closing, but then up here, we are spending as if nothing has changed. I would be happy to see instances like the wage bill we are talking about. I would be happy to see like the president coming and saying, we are having a problem with our wage bill. I have 20 advisors. I'm cutting them down to 3.
There was the wage bill conference at the Bomas of Kenya.
Exactly. We have 243 allowances that were highlighted by SRC. We are reducing them to X amount. I know Ashimiwa here know they might not be happy with what I'm saying because like now they have a sitting allowance, for instance. Every time they have a sitting, they are paid something. They have their mileage and things of that nature. This is where expenditure goes. Unless we are candid enough and sit somewhere and say, where do we reduce our expenditure? That is the only way we are going to reduce the fiscal deficit. Because as we have seen from the face of it, we are borrowing for recurrent against our own laws. These recurrent are these things I'm talking about, the salaries, the allowances, the offices, and the other expenditure that happens in government offices. And some of them are rightfully so. Because if you go to a government office and you need a document printed for you, there is an expenditure that comes with that. But that is not where we are seeing most of the money going. When we see our leaders flying around with choppers and everything, money is being spent there. So these are areas that we should see everybody. I would be happy if the president called for a meeting and say, let us come and discuss on areas that we are going to cut on expenditure. And then we start seeing that happen.
Yeah, and there was a general appreciation at the time when the Wage Bill conference happened at the Bomas of Kenya for also others who bear fake academic credentials but still drawing salary from the public coffers. Before we sample the feedback here, Dr. Yes, your hand was up, please.
Yeah, let me just very quickly summarize way forward.
Okay.
Because I think my colleagues have said quite a lot. The best way to push this economy to the next level. This economy has something called Vision 2030. And every 5 years, we have what we call the midterm plans. Can we stick to our planning documents? Because unless we are keen on planning, then we will not get it. The good thing with planning, and we call it strategic planning, is that it will give you the right priorities. So that when you push your resources, you push them to the right priorities. The second element, we have been overambitious in terms of projecting our revenue as a country. That's why we're talking about challenges of taxes and challenges of public debt. So can we become now realistic so that we say this is what we are likely to collect, and on the basis of this collection and our prioritized list, this is a much we can do as a country. The third element, we have no choice but to manage our public debt. We might want it, we might not want it. If we don't manage our public debt, Ayubu, I can tell you for sure, we continue lamenting here forever. The fourth thing is the wage bill. The wage bill, the way it is now, we have a problem. Two ways to sort it out. Either we be realistic and get those fake employees out of our payroll, or we grow the economy so that when you look at the denominator, because denominator is always the revenue, then you can reduce that figure to that 5%. The other item which is important, we are not talking about it on this table, but we must manage it. Corruption, issues of governance. We must get our things right, governance. And I want to tie that very close to what you said about Bear North. You know, what Kenyans don't know is that the money they are being given there is their own money. It's the money who should have gone to do their projects. It's been converted to handouts. So when they get these handouts, they are very happy clapping. You have your 1,000 to 500, but you're losing a whole water project costing you 10 billion. So Kenyans, you must make a decision. Do you want an handout economy or do you want development which is sustainable? If I were Kenyans, I would choose sustainable development. So that is at the end of the day, these guys who come campaign for 2 weeks, spend 100 million, and you'll never see them for the next 5 years, will have left you with a project which will serve you for 10 years. These are the issues, Ayubu. Now, as I conclude,
yes,
because I think you have got to the, as I conclude, Ayubu, I've done a very quick calculation, because this matter of 20,000 in dance is very critical. I was trying to do a calculation. Currently, they're earning 17,000. If they were permanent pensionable, they will move to 30,000 per month. The difference is only 2 billion. Please, let's provide, both Parliament and Executive, provide 2 billion to confirm these guys to employment. And they can do their work without demonstrations and getting out of work.
Okay, so let's sample the feedback, and I give you two gentlemen. You're way forward here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdulkarim. Frank Orinde says Treasury is unveiling the 25-6 budget. Kenyans still don't know what the current one delivered. Missed revenue targets, stalled projects, delayed county funds, and rising debt. New promises, yet old ones remain untouched. Accountability must come before fresh pledges.
Excellent.
Bob says the problem with Kenyan budget is that there's always a corruption budgeted economy which doesn't bring any significance to the common mwananchi. Next one is from E. Katumuta. Says, how does the so-called budget committee sit down and employ interns without a way out of their confirmation after the end of their contracts? Good Luck says, how can Parliament, which has a constitutional mandate, abdicate its role to the executive, allowing it to promise projects that were never budgeted for in the financial statement presented on the floor of the House? Supplementary budgets now seem to be undermining everything that was read in June. And Sir Nixon says it's true that there is no dignity quite so impressive and no independence quite so important as a nation living within its means. Sadly, a nation cannot rise or live within its means when its foundations are rooted in corruption. Yes, Honorable Ruto.
Thank you. Like I said, that hearing and listening to what Kenyans are saying from the bulletin that you've shot, from what we're saying here and from what they are saying there, is that there is a need to speak honest to ourselves. Honest in all aspects. Those in governance should remain honest. And as I've said again, we need to have a dissection of what happens in devolution. All this money, sometimes we lament about going to devolution. I think we need to have a moment of looking exactly what's happening in devolution. I don't know the ability of Auditor General to go deep and establish exactly what happens beyond the money releases to county governments. Because the impact of this and the essence of devolution was to bring about equity across the board. Another issue that I've said is that there are very painful decisions, very unpopular decisions that have to be made by a regime in place. The unfortunate part of this is the level we are politicizing everything in Kenya. The negativity that we are building in our politics that cannot give space to those in governance to make the right decisions. Because the moment you make a decision to go a way that it should be, and because of Wengi Wape, a way that our nation is divided into two in terms of politics, always 50+1, you can look at Kenya, unlike Tanzania. This is Tanzania, I think they're unique. I saw them, they're voting around 99%, the president. 98%. It's around 99%. I mean, you can say anything in Tanzania and it works. For Kenya here, you are struggling to make the 50.
Yeah.
You really struggle to even make 48.
+1.
+1. You know? So a country that is divided sharply in between on a different opinionated grounds because of political alignment, tribal alignment, is not going to solve our problem. I want to ask the Kenyans that let us rise and have a national discourse for ourselves and say, fine, if you've been elected today, Makali Mula, I pray for him. He tells me he's going to be a governor very soon over the county he's coming from. I pray for him. If he's going to, because as a professional person like him, sit down and call his people and say, look at this. This is the only basket we have. Ask Kitui, this is where we are. How are we going to start? Where are we going to start? Thanks. Number two, we cannot keep discussing about employment and PE when the reality is that it is not sustainable. Let us look at the basics. Let's go back to basics. Let's trigger the basics that can sustain our economy. As I've said, there are some areas that we must agree. Issues of excise and taxes on some products that can be produced in Kenya. We must make them expensive, allow excise duty on them so that we can accommodate our own products. The day we begin to balance here, because we are going to retain our money, we are going to retain employment, we are going to channel money into the pockets of people, we are going to increase our buying power. And in future 10 years to come, Kenya will be stable. 5 years, it will be better. Thank you so much.
Yes, Churchill.
So the budget as it is, or how we work our budget, is what we call the medium-term expenditure framework, whereby we may start with the baseline, which is now the current financial year, and now start working out the next 3 financial years. But we've been hearing talks about zero-based budget that ideally, which will append the whole framework that we know in terms of the budget making process. I'm still struggling how it will be implemented, because even as we start the budget hearing process today, we'll be working within the framework of the medium term, whereby all the MDAs will be giving their budget for the next 3 financial years. Whereas, if you look at zero-based budget, accountant is here, speaks about now looking at all from scratch. It's like you don't think about what happened in the previous and start to inflate for the next financial years. So I'm still struggling how it will work out, but I think we'll still go back to the medium-term expenditure framework.
Thank you.
In terms of also the nexus, because even at this point, from the MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies, we get what they call the resource requirements and what has been allocated to them, which is within the BRO budget review and outlook paper. You find that the difference is like 1 trillion. But then because of the process, there's some interactions between the different departmental committees in Parliament. Time and again, this is now the nexus whereby supplementary budgets comes from, because the budget, as we go further down the road, I find it still expanding. So if the MPs cannot be able to at least ensure that the budget is contained within the constraints of the BROP or BPS, I think that will be a way to reduce the expenditure going forward.
Okay, and we end it at that, gentlemen. Many thanks for your time.
I think there's something important.
I have it
very brief.
Yeah, okay. 30 seconds, please.
Somebody commented about the current budget, which we don't seem to have looked at. Just very quick figures. Development was about 720 billion. As at now, exchequer releases are only 60 billion, Q1, opposed to 180 billion. So you can see that we are doing. Counties was expected to get about 500 by the end of the year, including the conditional grants. Up to now, they have only got about 100 billion. So you can see even in terms of the current budget implementation, we are facing challenges. But another 2 quick points. One of them is the supplementary budget. I like the few who have said supplementary budgets have actually replaced the main budget. It should be the other way around. The main budget should be guiding the budgeting process, not supplementary budgets. To make it worse, presidential pronouncements, these promises, we are seeing all over the place. Is an issue we need to discuss the next sitting.
Thank you. Sure. 30 seconds, Alex.
Thank you. Mine is just to ask government to be open to receive comments and participation from the public, including the civil society. We are not adversarial. We all want the best for this country, and therefore, when we request to be involved, we are part of this country, and that is why we are going to be participating in the hearings today and all the way up to Friday. And our hope is that our comments will be taken and they will shape what will come out of this process as we go into the BPS process.
Alex, thank you. Dr. Makali, thank you. Churchill, thank you. Honorable Ruto, thank you. Appreciate it. And of course, we'll keep on discussing this, including those pronouncements that are not budgeted for Parliament again coming to the debate, because you are the guardrail of all, since you hold the power to the past. Many thanks for waking up with us here on the broadcast. Good morning.